I just got back from my first mapping and the activation of my M-Link hearing aid, so now I'm Bi-Modal. I asked a lot of questions and I learned a lot. It was definitely an upgrade, but there's still a ways to go. My biggest question for my audiologist at this point is, can we do this again tomorrow? Hi, I'm Vince. Well, that was interesting and exciting. My next mapping is in 4 weeks, and I'm already making up a list of questions and things to experiment with. I wish it were tomorrow, or, I wish my audiologist would just give me a copy of the mapping software and tools and let me have a go at it. What could possibly go wrong? My mind is kind of spinning with thoughts, questions, and possibilities, so I'll do my best to keep this video focused on my mapping. My immediate reaction is that most things got better, but one thing got worse. I'll explain in a minute. I've been looking forward to getting my M-Link hearing aid activated like an 8-year-old waiting for Santa to come. I knew that phone calls, Zoom calls, audiobooks, and using my Roger mic would get a massive upgrade. Hearing with both ears just makes such a big difference, especially when you're not quite ready to rely on your new, strange-sounding cochlear implant. I was a savvy shopper and purchased a lightly used Phonak M-Link from a fellow Advanced Bionics customer who received her second implant and went bilateral and so no longer needed it. I had an ear mold made for it during my activation appointment a couple of weeks ago, and I couldn't wait to get that sucker turned on. So my audiologist fires it up and clicks the buttons to link it to my Marble processor, and I see a warning pop up on the screen. This hearing device is not compatible with this Marble processor. We looked at each other, then at the hearing device, and she told me, this is a pediatric hearing aid and it can only be linked with a pediatric processor. We looked at the information sheet that was included in the box, and as clear as day, it was listed as an AB Phonak Sky Link M. The seller had sent me a copy of that sheet, and I looked at it closely. I knew that Sky was the brand name that AB Phonak uses for pediatric products, but it just never registered for some reason. Anyway, resigned to shelling out the big bucks and dealing with the pediatric device later, I asked if I could just buy one today. And she said, sure. I have to order it though, so I can't program it today. Hearing this, of course, I immediately collapsed to the floor and began to kick the walls while sobbing uncontrollably. At this point, she said, let me go see if I can set you up with a loaner, and she stepped over me and left the room. She came back shortly with a loaner Link M. I composed myself and tucked my shirt back in, and we then proceeded with the fitting session. Okay, I might be exaggerating a little. You might recall from my last video that I am hearing everything about an octave high, and I asked if we could try to work on that. She suggested, and I agreed, that we should definitely work on a strategy to address that, but not today. Today was mainly discussing M levels, basically getting matching levels across the electrodes. As the nerve and brain become acclimated, the stimulation required to achieve a comfortable level across the electrodes needs to be adjusted, usually upward. So my mapping resulted in some tweaks to my frequency response curve and a global increase in stimulation levels, which means more volume. A cursory stab at balancing out the apparent volume of the implant on the left with the hearing aid on the right followed. She made the excellent point that I am still very early in my adaptation phase and that changing too many things all at once can lead to a situation where things get better or things get worse, but it's almost impossible to tease out why things got better or things got worse. Patience, young grasshopper. And then it was time to dig into this whole mapping process and what might be possible as far as pitch goes. Without getting too deep into the weeds, she explained that the frequencies are divided among the 16 electrodes. Turning off the first electrode out on the base of the implant, electrode 1, would cause all of the frequencies to be automatically reallocated across the remaining active electrodes. This would presumably result in frequencies shifting somewhat down toward the base of the cochlea, where lower pitches are perceived. But she cautioned that doing so would change the crossover points, affecting which frequencies are stimulated by which electrodes in a willy-nilly manner. However, it is possible to dig a little deeper into the software and directly manipulate the frequency allocation tables, but that would take a dedicated session, best accomplished after I've lived with the thing for a longer period of acclimation. I'm impatient, but I had to admit that that made a lot of sense. There's also a tool built into the mapping software called NRI, or Neural Response Imaging. This is a way of using the implant to measure and map how the auditory nerve responds to signals from a given electrode. By matching specific electrodes to the peak response of the auditory nerve, the geography of the cochlea, as it were, can be mapped out. This information can then be used when manipulating the frequency allocation tables to more closely match a given frequency to the electrode that's close to that frequency's natural location in the cochlea, in a less random manner. So, of course, I said, well, can you turn off that one electrode so I can see what a willy-nilly shift down sounds like? And she said, sure. First impressions are difficult, but I think I liked it. Everything sounds lower in pitch, closer to what my other ear was hearing, but it was kind of fuzzy. I'd need more time to check it out, so I asked if I could have that saved as one of my 3 program slots so that I could audition it at home. And again, she said, sure. I mentioned at the beginning that one thing got worse at this fitting, but again, only temporarily. She fit the Link M hearing aid to my audiogram and also put on the custom ear mold. My audiogram shows that my natural low-frequency hearing is pretty good and doesn't need boosting, so very little low-frequency stuff is being sent to my hearing aid. However, since I'm wearing an ear canal blocking ear mold, I'm also not getting very much of my natural low-frequency hearing. This is a problem because, as we all know, it's all about that bass. Am I right? And speaking of bass, my implant side is still not getting natural low frequencies well enough for us to even talk about getting an acoustic ear hook yet. But being just a month out from surgery, it's still too soon to tell how that's going to play out. So for now, it's all about clarity and not at all about full spectrum hearing. Streaming music is pitched up in my implant ear, and it's super thin and mid-range boosted in my other ear with no bass, like no bass in either side. Not great. But I can communicate with other human beings. On my way home, I stopped at a local place for a sandwich and coffee. I confidently placed my order, understood every question, and clearly heard when they called my name. That may not sound like a big deal, but it was to me. Then I came home and I watched an interesting interview on my TV through my stereo system. I could hear it very clearly. So I did a little experiment and turned off the closed captions, and still I could hear it very clearly. That hasn't happened in years. I was on the phone today, streaming via Bluetooth through my seamless and well-integrated Advanced Bionics Bi-Modal setup, and it was awesome. Very clear. No problems at all. I prefer that the pitch in the left side was normal and less weird, but when you're having a clear conversation with someone, you really don't think about it. What I did think about is how well I can function in these situations 2 weeks after activation. Now, this part I can't stress enough for anyone out there who's in the consideration phase, asking themselves, should I get a cochlear implant? I want to be as frank and honest with you as I can. I don't want to be one of those people who doesn't offer details when they're telling you that it's life-changing or that you'll love it. You need to know what you're signing up for. What I'm experiencing will continue to get better, but, only to a degree. This is not like LASIK surgery for your ears. If your hearing loss came to you later in life, you will not suddenly be able to hear the world like you used to. If you're an audio snob or a trained professional listener like I used to be, you'll probably never again be able to appreciate, say, the sonic subtleties that differentiate vinyl records from compact discs. You might, but you probably won't. That's probably over. But when you hang out with a group of your friends and carry on a conversation without feeling left out and without smiling and nodding at things you didn't really hear, you might mourn the loss of your old hearing, like me, but say to yourself, hey, that sucks, but understanding the people in my life has already turned out to be a bigger deal than I thought that it would. If I had to do it all over again, at this point, I have to say, yes, I would. As always, reach out to me in the comments. I read them all, and I'm happy to connect with any of you about this crazy cochlear implant journey. I wish you all well, and thank you for listening.